Do you have half an hour?
No, I don't think Terrell does.
No. It's let's just say I'm from all over the place. Just
Yeah.
yeah.
I think we're live, guys.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
nice.
You want to
Already
check
get-
that for us, Nadine?
I'm
Thank
sorry,
you
say
so
that
much.
again?
Can you check to make sure we really are live? Like
Okay,
it's this
will
live,
do.
but I want to make sure we're live. Oh my God, if you did not kick it with us a few moments ago at the webinar, you missed out. But it's okay. We're going to like post the whole episode on our website, and that's going to be fantastic. You want to get that. We're joining you right now. We are New Church Ministry. We just wrapped a webinar episode on exploring the Enneagram with 8+ hacks. And so our conversationalists here are joining us. And then this is the New Church Ministry team, Jose Martinez, Nadine Compton. And so I want to real quick have all of our conversationalists introduce themselves to you so you can get a little bit of understanding. And then we had such a rich conversation a moment ago during the webinar that we didn't really get a chance to get into the Q&A section. So we're going to pound those out right here in a few moments and really try to figure out some of these questions that people had. It was a super, I mean, like, can we just stop for a moment and just talk about how engaging and amazing the conversation was a few moments ago?
Nice, thanks.
Oh, you guys are being
Yeah, we're so shy.
underplaying that moment. Like it was dynamic. Okay. Well, all right. Let me say this. Christiana, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome to Facebook Live. It was such an engaging conversation.
Thank you.
Terrell, for bringing that up. I am one of the directors of the Parish Collective, which is a global network of folks figuring out what it means to be the church in the everyday life of our neighborhoods. I get to host a lot of different kinds of gatherings and trainings and storytelling events, and basically connect people to join the dream of God for the healing of the world. Is that too big? I don't think so. So I am, but I've found the Enneagram to be one of the many tools, but one of the most transformative tools when it comes to personal formation and also even engagement in place. So that's me.
Great. Thank you so much. Who do you want to go next?
Ooh, I'm going to go with Kim.
But she didn't have the cool banner.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, we're saving that cool banner, Trey. We're saving that for later. Kim Gage Ryan. I am the co-director pastor of Bethany Fellows. Bethany Fellows serves congregations by supporting young pastors in their earliest years of ministry. I was recently invited to one of our alumni virtual groups, and they asked the question of each other, where do you find hope? And my answer to that question is I find hope in the pastors with whom I serve and I get to serve, because they are doing amazing ministry right now. Incredibly creative, incredibly innovative, hard work, challenging, and stepping up to do it. So I'm honored to be a part of that ministry, honored to be a part of this conversation. Enneagram has been an influence in my life for about the last 7 years. As I said on our earlier program, I came to it with a lot of skepticism and a lot of even frustration, because people would be talking numbers with each other and I didn't know what those numbers meant. And I've been known to say, shut up. I don't know what you're talking about. But once I knew what they were talking about, then it really became an integral part of my self-understanding, helping me understand others, communities, all the things that we talked about this afternoon. So I choose see it as a tremendous tool. Trey, with the fancy chart.
I'm Trey Flowers, the senior pastor at Downey Avenue Christian Church in Indianapolis, Indiana, and just resonate with what's already been said. But I got a lot out of being on the panel. Christiana and Kim are amazing. So really cool to learn from them. Even while being on the panel, I feel like I got a lot more out of it than I gave. So thank you both for that. And that's really, I think, a testament to the depth of the Enneagram. Like, it just never stops. There is so much you can do with the Enneagram. And for 10 years now, since Kim and the Bethany Fellows introduced me to the Enneagram, it has truly changed my life. And I don't say that lightly. And for the last few years, I feel like it has really, on top of changing my life as a whole, for the last few years, I've really been focusing on how it has changed my ministry. And there's some real concrete ways that I can look at and say that I'm a better pastor, better preacher because of the Enneagram. And so I'm really thrilled after starting in 2014 to be done this month with my doctorate of ministry program at Phillips Theological Seminary. So shout out to all the Phillips people out there. My project for my DMin was the Enneagram and preaching. So I've been living and breathing this, and just kind of threw it out super quick, and we're vomited a few things that I've learned along the way, but there's a whole lot more to it, and hope we can talk about that now or another time down the road too.
All right, fantastic, guys. Thank you so much. I want to turn things over to Jose, the associate minister for New Church Ministry, and he also understands quite a bit about the Enneagram. So does Nadine. Like, it's been a really big thing for us as a team, especially with us who work with church planters and new church leaders, and helping them to do team development, and even with understanding our own selves as a team. And so I know that both of them have lots of questions for you guys, and then also we'll try to integrate some of the questions that were left over from the webinar. So Jose.
Yeah, just first off, I want to give you guys props again. Such a great webinar, and just so many things to garner from it. I mean, things that weren't said. I look at the Enneagram from a church planter view. Not only is it great for leadership development, but I think it's a great tool for discipleship. You know, that contemplation part of understanding self, and then understanding self within community, and understanding self with God, you know. So it's so awesome. One of the things I kind of want you to kind of talk about maybe, and this is throwing in a new curveball with the whole Enneagram, is about the wings. You know, so I'm a 7. I know I'm a wing 8, and you know, sometimes that 8 comes out roaring mad. So would any of you like to care to talk about the 8s and how, or not the 8s, the wings, and how that helps you in your Enneagram?
Well, I'll start. I'm a 6, so I probably had a stronger wing 5 when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, my wing 7 has become more prominent. And so and we were talking about this before the webinar, actually, and I think it probably emerged in a time in my life when I really had to step into more courage in my personal life. I went through a separation, I went through a divorce, and the 7 wing, I think, supported me in taking more risks, more adventures, being able to be more spontaneous. And so I found that shift that happened with the wings. And now I think I can utilize both. I can recognize when my energy's waning, and that has something to do with my 5 wing, and honor that, not try to talk myself out of it. So there's a more of a balance for me now with both the wings.
Yeah, I wonder.
Can even Christiana, maybe you just even, like, Trey gave a very brief overview of the whole thing, and there's so many layers and complications to this, as you know, you guys spoke of, but even maybe use Trey's background to help one understand, like, here's your number, then here are your wings, that type of situation.
Yep, I was going to pitch that over to Trey for that, but I got you. Okay, so here, okay, as you can see, his beautiful wheel.
Yeah, move, Trey.
Hey, move, scoot over. It's color coded, right? It's color coded. So I'm an Enneagram 3, and I've got that like kind of forest green. So here's how I like to think about the Enneagram. We're each a color. But just because I'm a forest green and Terrell is also a forest green Enneagram 3, there are endless shades of even within forest green. There are endless shades of an Enneagram 3. That's why 2 Enneagram 3s, like Terrell and myself, I'll just use us as specimens, we are the same type, but we look different. we present different, we act different. Like there's a difference between us, even though there's a familiarity because we share the same type. Some of the reasons for that are just the brilliance of the divine creator who makes every human different, like no other human, thanks be to God. But within that, to kind of try to mine a little bit of our differences, the Enneagram does a beautiful job of helping us look at why our shade of forest green 3 might differ from that of our someone who shares the same type with us. So one of the dynamics within that is a wing. So every type, so as a 3, as you can see on the wheel, there is also lime green and teal green. Lime green 2 and teal, lime 2 and teal 4. So I'm right in the middle between the 2 and the 4. So a big just corrective for anyone who wonders if you can have a wing that's across the Enneagram. The answer is you cannot. You can only have a wing that is literally attached to you. So your left or your right, or in this case, above you or below you, or wherever that lands on the wheel. So I am a 3, a forest green 3 with my own unique shade, and my wing is the lime 2. And so that just it impacts me. So as a 3, an achiever or performer, because I'm a 2, I also that has shaped the way I present and my deep motivation, which also includes aspects of the 2 as the helper, so that's how that shapes it. Whereas the 4 is the individualist. If I were a 3 with a wing 4, that's more dominant. You generally have access to both, but usually we all have preference or dominance toward one. So for the 4, then that's going to shape the way that 3 shows up in the world. So they'll have aspects and elements of all the aspects of that type. So the virtue and the vice, the integration, disintegration of your wing also impacts you. So it's just another layer of listening and self-awareness. There you go.
Trey, you got anything to add with that?
That was a fantastic overview. I would only add that I, like Jose, am also a 7 wing 8, so we should be friends. But we were, like Kim said, we were talking about this a little bit before we got on, and I was explaining that about right at 10 years ago this year was the big earthquake in Haiti, if you remember that. And I was there when it happened. I was in Port-au-Prince on a mission trip and nearly died. And it was a really realigning, defining moment of my life. And I can look back now and really trace when I was a 7 winging 6, and 6, like my dear friend Kim, 6 is in the fear triad. And Kim, you could probably explain it better, but 6 is live with a fear or maybe even an anxiety of what might go wrong next. And on the other side of my 7ness is 8, which is the active controller. 8s love challenging things. 8s love being the leader, the strong person. And when that earthquake happened in Haiti, it was so realigning for me that, like, when I look back on my life, even though I didn't know the Enneagram then, I can really feel like before that moment, I was living in my 6 wing, and I chose, like, I cannot live in fear. Like, I'm on an island trying to literally survive. I can't live in fear. I've got to be in charge. I've got to lead. I've got to do something. And I felt myself really developing that 8 wing. And I feel like I've got this whole access to this part of the Enneagram that I didn't really have before that experience. So it might be that that would have developed later in life naturally some other way. Might be lots of people who experience wing in one part of their life and a different wing the next part of their life. That might change differently for lots of different people. It's not always rooted in trauma. But for me, it was such a powerful experience that I can look back and, like, see how the Enneagram just realigned me in that moment.
That's so great to hear. One of the things that you kind of talked about a little bit is this triad dynamic. Can you further explain a little bit more? Because I see that, there's the thinking, there's the feeling, and then there's, I don't know the proper name. People call it the Anchor Triad. I can't see the top part of that. So.
Yeah, doing. I didn't realize it's going to be such the Vanna White of this, or I would have done that a little more.
Yeah, can you explain further on what the meaning of triad means for the Enneagram, Trey?
Yeah, so there's lots of layers of that. And I mean, there's lots of different ways to picture the Enneagram. It's usually the kind of just stick line figure. And that has its own real depth and power. But like for me as a 7, like I wanted colors and something fun to look at. So I looked on the website, on the internet, like found a couple different versions, composited them together. And this is what I use to teach. And I really like the language that this one uses. Both the colors, I think, help group the triads together. But there's also different ways that it's said. You might hear head, gut, or heart triads. But for me, I really resonate with the language of thinking, feeling, and doing. And the way that Suzanne Stabile teaches this, I hope I don't butcher it too badly, but Suzanne says that when we are born balanced creatures among those 3 areas: thinking and feeling and doing. That's how we're made. And then somewhere along the line, usually early in our childhood, one of those things really starts to work well for us. We learn that we can think our way through a problem, or we learn that if we express our feelings, then we'll get what we want. Or if we take charge and we do something about it, then everybody will listen to us. Like we learn to develop one of those things and really rely on it as our strength. And so our Enneagram number is going to develop in that triad. But at the same time, the opposite's also true. We learn to rely on one, but at the expense of another one. So we have a dominant center, which is that one we learn to rely on, but there's also a repressed center. So as a 7, I'm over here in the thinking center. 5s, 6s, and 7s are this thinking center, thinking triad, also called the head triad. For me as a 7, like absolutely, I can think like nobody's business. Like new ideas just come, they just roll off. Like people will bring things, I don't even have to think about it. Like it just is such a natural part of who I am. That looks very different than the way that a 5 thinks through the problems, wanting to know every fact, every figure, every data. But we're all in this thinking center. But for me as a 7, while I'm thinking dominant, I'm also feeling repressed. So for me as a 7, I learned to think my way through a problem. I can just imagine another scenario. It might not even exist. So what 7s have is called magical thinking. But I can think the world as I want it to be and survive life that way. So I have a dominant thinking center, but I also have this repressed feeling center. Like I go through life and ignore the fact that I might feel really angry or sad when life doesn't look the way I thought it would. And so 7s really have a half range of emotions, is what Suzanne says. Is that it's not that we don't have all of the emotions, but we're really only willing to admit the positive ones. So for me as a 7, like when my wife asked me how my day was, it was always great. Like, did anything bad happen? No. Why would I think about that? And even the language choices that we use, she's a 3, so she's right here in the feeling center. And it's fascinating to me to look at the way that our triads like literally impact our communication style. When something happens, if I ask her to interpret it, I'll say, so what'd you think about that? Because I'm in the thinking center. And when something happens, she'll ask, how'd you feel about that? She's in the feeling center. Like literally our language choices are influenced. We didn't even know the Enneagram. That's just the way we communicate because of our dominant centers. So there's a lot more to that. But that thinking, feeling, and doing has been the easiest way for me to really process it.
Christiana, did you want to say something to that?
Well, I actually was noting, Nadine, you're also 7, right? Correct. Does that resonate with you, that thinking center?
Yes. I'm also a woman, so I experience life differently than Trey does, just because we live in a society that treats women different than men. Nothing, this is not news to anyone. But I'm also thinking back on, conversations with a friend who, is a social worker, has experience with psychology, and they will often like stop me and say, how are you actually like feeling? Because you're not sharing everything with me. I know you really well, and you're not sharing. And it's okay if you share it with me. You know that, right? And I'm like, I don't even know how to do that. And I would like to think, oh yeah, I'm so in touch with I know. But then when someone confronts you like that, and I think it's really important that no matter what number you have, that you have a friend in your corner or a person that you trust, that they can kind of say, hey, wait a second, so I think that was, I'm really personally, because I like Trey bringing that up, because this is like free therapy. So thanks, Trey.
Yeah, thanks, Trey.
Well, and I mean, I totally resonate with what you're saying, Nadine. And I think, that's the gift of the Enneagram. It's not just like, here's the picture of the way things are. It's also a map of what we can choose to be. And it doesn't mean we can just choose to be a different number, but for us who are sevens and our instinct is to be feeling repressed, it doesn't mean we don't have feelings, and it doesn't mean we can't acknowledge the feelings. It just means we have a harder time getting there. So putting those people in our lives and learning to trust the people around us when they ask how we're doing, like really learning that that's okay to answer that honestly. Like, and I don't want to tell Christiana or Terrell how they are in the world, but like as a threes might not acknowledge their feelings, but threes will tend to kind of hide those feelings from themselves. Sevens don't even know that we had the feelings. Like somebody has to really stop us and say, okay, there's no way you thought that it was great to almost die in an earthquake. How are you really doing with that? Like you have to pin a 7 down and say, think about that a little more. Think your way to your feelings.
Yeah. CP really sucked for me because I'm a 7 also. So it's like, how are you feeling? Like, you're dealing with all these traumatic events, and once you're out of the hospital, hey, you're out of the hospital. I don't even think about it once I'm out. So really interesting to see. So Christiana, you're very involved with the Parish Collective, and the collective is trying to develop communities in a different type of way. And so one of the things that I wonder about, and as a church planter, is how can we better utilize this Enneagram to better engage our community, especially in the New Commons area, if we want to use Parish Collective language, the New Commons. Like, how do we, what is the best way for us to really utilize and understanding this Enneagram to cause transformation in society or their community?
Right. Well, I think this is such a brilliant, beautiful starting point of asking these questions, like who's in your corner, who's in my corner, that I'm healthy and well as I'm engaging missionally in my context and learning to be the church, the people of God in a place, beginning with that question, examining our own wellness, wholeness, honesty. And then immediately, as you were both speaking, I was thinking, what if also we're in people's corners, and not for the sake of like growing our church, but because that's God's idea, that humans to humans can love, we can love people, and we can be in their corner, and we can know better questions to ask, so that, if I'm identifying the sevens in my life, or in my neighborhood, or in the context in which I'm wanting to just engage in what God's up to, birthing something new in that place, that I know better questions to ask that might relate to their Enneagram preferences. And again, not to box anybody in, because most of us are still trying to figure ourselves out anyway, and many people have mistyped. So it's just a curiosity. That's all it is. It's just entering in with curiosity. And then I would also say that when you start entering into environments like the civic environments of our neighborhoods, of our cities, of our regions and our states, it is fascinating how our awareness of Enneagram influence in those spaces. So you may find, there are certain types within certain sectors. And so then, this is the work, like, oh, let's link up with the 8s who are going to like they're going to actually contend for justice in a way that that none of the rest of us can, and heck, we better follow, And then if we need the mercy, I had these beautiful nuns from the Sisters of Mercy. We did a little barbecue yesterday, or on Labor Day, cross street, a physically distant, socially connected space. And they were telling me the history of the Sisters of Mercy and in this new community that they're planting 2 neighborhoods over from me, with one of our neighbors who just moved to join them. And I was overwhelmed with how beautiful kind of the Enneagram 2 leads out in that space. So then I began to wonder about that. So it's curiosity. It's curiosity. It's a posture of learning. It's a posture of engagement. And I think communities, so that's the other thing too. How do we gather? How do we worship? We have customized not only our preaching, but we have customized our sense of worship in community toward only particular types of people. There are so many different ways that we can engage the presence of God: collective worship, remembrance, confession, the Eucharist, even, according to the ways in which each of us are designed. It requires curiosity, creativity. So these are the things that I think I love to explore. And the other thing about it is that it's not just, you can't really just apply these principles to one place and think it's going to work in every place. When you're thinking of new churches, you really have to approach every place as a unique, like you would with a unique person. You approach a place as a unique place, not like nowhere else has ever been. You apply wisdom, but you certainly don't apply, the same sort of formula. So.
And if I can just jump on that real quick. I think that's one of the interesting paradoxes almost of the Enneagram, is how incredibly complex and never ending it is, but also at the same time, how incredibly simple it is. Suzanne Stabile says, there's nothing that the Enneagram is going to teach you that you won't already learn by the time you're 100 years old. It just teaches it to you a little quicker. By giving you the system and this framework. And that was one of the things when I was doing my doctorate project of the tension between simplicity and complexity. To harp on Christiana's point, how simple it is to acknowledge that there's more than one perspective in the room. Obviously everybody knows that. But when you actually use the Enneagram to complexify and actually step into what is it like to be any of these other people in the room? How is this person going to hear this message? The Enneagram gives you that tool and that framework to develop empathy and to develop compassion. And that's that's a game changer. So, there's all these simple ideas. Nothing sounds that revolutionary, but when you actually do the work, it changes your life.
I think everybody knows that, but I don't think everybody acknowledges that.
Right.
We are wildly frustrated with the idea that why don't you get this the same way I do? Whatever the small little thing is, we get so big and frustrated by the fact that someone does not get it or understand it in the same way that we do, and it just causes these rifts. And I think it was Kim, you a moment ago, or maybe Christiana, acknowledged the beautiful way in which God deliberately caused his creation to be diverse. And that includes in the way we think and feel and do. And so, yeah, I think using this construct in that way is very helpful. And I think we have some Facebook questions even that are speaking kind of about the role diversity plays in that. Nadine?
Yep. So they were also asked in the chat during the episode itself. So just to kind of smush them together, is there any correlation between certain ethnic groups and specific Enneagram types?
I'll jump in, but I know there's been different, I think even a question like that is really, it's tender, it's sensitive. What I've read mostly, what I've experienced has been that people can overlay a general, and I would even use the word stereotype to describe a particular country. There's a lot of people saying that. It's kind of interesting, the United States has a general, we celebrate those who've climbed the ladder of success and, fought for their own, and they're like our rock stars. And so Enneagram 3 is like celebrated in the United States of America, a self-made success story. But if you drop down into any culture, and I've now experimented with this just barely, but with a few different cultures, even within any subculture, subtype, ethnic community, you find that this same unique sort of pattern exists. It's just that sometimes they're not allowed to shine in certain settings. So that's my take on it. I could be off. Real quick example: I grew up in Japan, in the city of Tokyo. So I did a training in English and Japanese with a large group of Japanese folks in Japan, and the experience was so different. How they engaged was so culturally shaped, but every Enneagram type was represented. It just required a different kind of environment of discovery. So that's my take on it. That's my opinion. But I do think that there are things to just pay attention to with some of those differences or uniqueness.
Yeah, and Kim, I don't know if you have anything else to add too.
No, I haven't had a lot of experience in communities, just more individuals. And in terms of a diverse community, like a gathering of Bethany Fellows, within the community, individuals self-identify. And so there doesn't seem to be any general pattern that I've noticed in that way. I would also just say, I think there may be some suspicion toward the Enneagram being more of a white Anglo tool, and that's worth asking the question and being curious about. But I also think some of that comes from not understanding the deeper, wider history of the Enneagram. It's not a modern tool. It's very ancient, and it comes from a variety of cultures. So if we go deeper in its history, it widens, I think, the accessibility to it as a useful tool.
And just to expand on that a little bit too, there's lots of different theories about the origins of the Enneagram, but there are traces of its existence in different cultures. And one of the earliest instances of that goes back to the desert mystics, and there are actually writings about, they don't use the word Enneagram, but a very similar system that seems to have given birth to Enneagram out of Alexandria, Egypt. So it is in its origin, as best we know, out of the African continent. And it was really, for centuries, was handed down in a one-on-one spiritual direction, where they actually only taught you your number. They didn't even tell you what the other 8 types were, under the assumption that it's enough of a lifetime's work for you to work on yourself before you start looking around, figuring out how to change other people. And I think there's some validity to that to a degree, but when it really started to be brought back, like as an actual academic discipline and a more systematic thing that we know today as the Enneagram, that movement was really out of South America. Claudia Naranjo out of Bolivia and Argentina. So it is really a multi-continent system of wisdom collected across cultures. And I do think its most modern history has become more visible by the fact that a lot of the Enneagram teachers and writers are white, but I do think that is like they both said, I think that's papering over the true richness of the history and where this wisdom actually comes from.
Yeah, it's so true. I know the amount of, if you ask like what authors or who do you follow on Enneagram, it's your classic you know, way back to you, or consecutive books, or Richard Rohr. But Claudio Naranjo has become very, quieted, even though that work is foundational. And then another quick shout out to Mickey Scape Jones, who's written African-American Woman, who's said a lot on her journey and also written it on behalf of communities of color, saying like, hey, this is something that's been a part of our, not only our heritage, but something we're engaged in as well. So I think like there are voices to learn from, but as usual, we have to search them out. Women, people of color, women of color, So I think it's more around, the usual story of silencing and imbalance than it is around whether or not this kind of wisdom applies across cultures and across difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Trey.
I do think that our culture influences the way that we perceive ourselves. And in the United States, in our patriarchally dominated culture, it is true that more women overreport as twos initially, and that men tend to underreport themselves initially as twos, which is the helper, because when you read about the nature of a two, like it sounds like these gender norms and biases that we inherit because of the culture we live in tends to celebrate those virtues in women and tends to suppress those virtues in men. And so it can be harder to actually look within and discover your true motivation if your culture suppresses or celebrates some of those values across lines of race or gender. So I in my experience, I don't think that means that our actual numbers are influenced by those things, but our willingness to engage with who we are might be influenced by those things.
Yep. Family of origin as well, which can be culturally infected,
One of the things that this is bringing up for me as a question is, we've already discussed how ancient this wisdom is. However, when I look at like the trend as it's getting more popular, it's like an explosion, and that there's so many people out there wanting a connection, this body wisdom sort of thing, connection. And so the Enneagram is very appealing to that. You can go on social media like Instagram, type in Enneagram, and about 100 sites pop up where they have these pictures of like, yeah, this is a 7. Here's some of the characteristics, blah, 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 that sort of thing. Or podcasting. There's a few good podcasts I listen to that talk about the Enneagram. So one of the things that I'm wondering, what do you think your personal opinion is about people wanting to dive into this connection, this spiritual connection? Because to me, the Enneagram's really spiritual. There's a lot of contemplation. There's a lot of storytelling. This a lot of spiritual disciplines in it. Naturally, not necessarily connected to any one religion, but it is very spiritual. So, any of you care to talk about that?
Yeah, and I'd actually, Terrell, you and I kind of met around the time when you were going through this process with Trey. Pardon the airplanes, by the way. And we're under the flight path, but I can see the ocean. So, so I remember those days when it felt like kind of like revelatory, personally revelatory and self-discovery. And I'd just be curious, because I think we all, Kim, you shared a story around kind of the sort of awakening and how that was I think, I would say that was a spiritual experience. I too remember similar feeling moments of connecting with my type and being, both like feeling kind of exposed and somewhat excited, and also kind of trying to, wish I really, really thought I was a 7. I grew up in homes of 7s, and I present like a 7, but I'm definitely a 3. So, it's a spiritual awakening. And then it also, if we choose to, we step onto a path towards spiritual growth. It's one of the most beautiful, I think, typologies or personality discovery tests or pathways that guides us and gives us a pathway towards spiritual growth. So I think, I'd love to hear maybe even your experience with that, Terrell, if you've experienced that at all as well, since kind of going through that path. I know that has been the case for me, but
yeah,
okay.
absolutely. Because when I first got it, I was type to 3. I don't even remember what I used to do that. But then as I was engaged in Trey's class, they said it would be helpful for you to know. But if you weren't sure, so I was so much wanted to reject the idea of being a 3 that I just that I had to take it again. And Kim, you said that earlier, like when you first heard it, it made you sick, want to like throw up. It just was so much. I don't want to say it resonated. It just like caused this type of reaction within your being. And so the same thing was true for me. And so then when I took it again and I was still a 3, I was like, oh my God. So I guess there must be some truth to this. And then as they started talking through the class and it really got to the 3, I'm like, well, as I'm listening to everyone else, there's nothing else I could be, but we do know that 3s, we struggle with self-deceit, so it is my thing to tell myself that I am something else or really try to battle with that. And it is all super spiritual. It does help me understand how to better connect with God, what things to pray for, how to treat others, and all the disciplines that I need within myself, the necessity for solitude, all those play into it. And so the more I learn about it and finally just accept it, then it does help me to grow.
Oof. Well, and let me say real quick on that acceptance, right? Self-acceptance. Is that not, if we think about even just the heart of God for all of us, and for, again, I'll point it toward our neighbors, everyone on my street out here is struggling with self-acceptance, right? So if I can guide them, like that's the divine creator is saying, accept yourself. I've made you with purpose and beauty and dignity, every one of you. And if this process can help us, like we can help others find self-acceptance, is that not transformation? Is that not our discipleship?
Absolutely. I mean, it is that empathy component.
Yes.
But on the same note, I can see us being like, have encountered a 1 and being like, you're driving me crazy. And so when you encounter another 1, you're like, no, I don't want to deal with these 1s anymore. And so making it very challenging for the right type of team building or community building or things like that. Like one of the questions during the webinar was, can we use this? Or one of the things I thought about was like, if we're trying to build a team, let's say a board, should we say, okay, you're a 3, you're a 4, I'm a 1, you're, so we need a 9 in the room. Is that the way you use these type of tools? Any thought? I saw you shaking your head, Trey. I don't like to be disagreed with, but okay, go ahead.
Well, I don't think it's that simple. I mean, it's not a math problem, and make sure you have every type in the room and you'll all get along great. Mm-hmm. Because now I do think that balancing, especially across thinking, feeling, and doing, is really important to pay attention to. So, we're a relatively small church. We have an associate pastor. We're not going to have 9 pastors on our staff and be able to perfectly select each one of those, and say, great, we've got the perfect team now. But if all of the pastors were in the thinking center and we couldn't naturally connect with the congregation in the feeling center, like how do you be a pastor without being able to naturally speak that language? You can develop it when you're aware, and that's one of the gifts of the Enneagram, is that you can learn what you're not good at and develop that. We really do have that capacity to grow. But I don't think it's as simple as just saying, make sure you've got representation across the board. Because the other thing you have to pay attention to is within each number, as Christiana was saying a while back, every number is not the same. And so it might be really helpful to have a 2 on our team. That doesn't mean every 2 is going to be a great match. Every single number, you can be healthy in your number, or or you can be unhealthy in your number. And an unhealthy number, when you're in that unhealthy space, you're not going to be the best colleague or the best pastor or the best whatever it is that you're doing. So that, I would almost pay attention more to that health and unhealth than trying to make sure you got the boxes checked across all 9 types. But when you develop a language and a vocabulary for how you talk about how you work with other people on your team, how you pay attention to when you're starting to not become healthy, or when you are growing into your healthier self, when you develop that language, then now your team has a lens and a way to talk about how we grow together. And again, like I said on the show, as a 7, like I've got a long list of things I'm just not good at. And so by being aware of that, like, there might be 5s who can do a really great job at compensating for my weaknesses. There might be 1s who can do a really great job. There might be 6s who can do a really great job. Like, it's not that some can work with you and others can't, but it's learning how do you work with those different types to make sure your team is holistic.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, Kim, were you wanting to jump in on that? On that, it looked like you had something to say.
Not particular. I mean, I agree with what Trey was saying, Christiana was saying. At some point in our conversation, I wanted to just mention that one of the things that the leaders of the Enneagram, teachers of the Enneagram, have emphasized, I think it goes back to something you were saying, Jose, is about the spirituality, is one of the key practices is spending 20 minutes in quiet every day. And some of them suggest twice a day, the morning and the evening, that somehow that quieting allows room for the spirit to do its work in affirming, somewhat like Christiana's been saying, our own beauty. But we have to quiet down to get in touch with that. And so that's a practice that I connect with my Enneagram understanding, because that's where the teachers that I know the most about have been coming from, is being sure to allow and encourage that kind of quieting.
Wow. Practice of being still. Mm-hmm. I just see, because I'm really big about spiritual disciplines, and to me, our world is it's in a spiritual health epidemic, right? There's a spiritual health epidemic going on where, people are not recognizing the sacred in the other. That's why we have these people talking over each other, bullying, sexual assault, domestic violence, you name it, all the isms, everything. There's just a spiritual health crisis, and that, it doesn't matter what religion they come from, that if we can help a pathway to help them into their spiritual disciplines, to be still, to sit and listen, deep listening, to have that deep solidarity with people. I think would have a better world. And so to me, the Enneagram is like, this is kind of like a good vehicle for that, and, I'm hoping that to promote this with our church planters within our denominations, like, understand the Enneagram for yourself, for your team, for your community, because, we believe that the church doesn't have walls. Where you're at, that's where church is. That's where God's at, sort of thing. That's where the sacred is. And just go explore and just help it flourish. And so with the Enneagram, it's just one of those tools that will help you, that whole thing flourish. Trey's been talking about it as a pastor, the way he uses it with an established congregation. Christiana or Kim, I'm wondering, like, in your experiences with people coming into ministry, or people, maybe not called into the clergy, but like have this deep sense of like being called to serve, what have you. What have your been experiences with that when you're talking about the Enneagram and those folks?
Kim, do you want to?
I'll say quickly, I think one of the key things I've witnessed in the workshops that we've had with Bethany Fellows is there's such a relief when someone identifies with their number of I'm understood. And someone finally understands me and I understand myself better. And that is such a critical place for then serving others. We get clearer about our own selves, both the motivations that are ours and the strengths that are ours to offer. Then we can better serve.
Mm. I love that. Like, that's right. That sense of perhaps I am understood. I think there's that sense, that big question, like, does anyone understand me? And actually, I think the answer to that question is a daunting no. No one actually really understands you. But maybe in these kinds of moments, we get to be a little closer to feeling understood. And I think that you're right. That is the beauty. The beauty, it connects us. It feels not as lonely as maybe this world can feel. I think another thing on that, I was really, I've been just moved by the wisdom of Bishop Curry, speaking of this epidemic, this pandemic of self-centeredness. I think that we do run the risk of the Enneagram moving us towards so much introspection. And that's the concern. A lot of people will comment on that, like, I'm done with just like, doesn't this just like make us more self-absorbed or self-centeredness? But the invitation of the Christ way is an others centeredness. And so I think as we engage the Enneagram and we live fully authentically into who we are, and I would direct that toward maybe these people stepping into a new kind of ministry, or it dismantles the shoulds and it allows them to live fully authentically into whatever God is up to in that place according to their uniqueness. And that is an others centered way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So Trey, did you have any insight on the, if you were mentoring a newly ordained or someone that's interested in like starting a ministry or starting some sort of serving program, maybe nonprofit, social enterprise, what are some of the things that you would say to that person?
Well,
in context of the Enneagram?
Catching my breath from what Christiana said, I think she hit the nail on the head. I speak at it largely from the lens of a pastor because that's who I am, but I believe very firmly and fully in the power of the Enneagram to help all of us, whatever our vocation, our station in life, to grow more fully into who God's invited us to be. I think the Enneagram makes me a better pastor, but the Enneagram isn't a tool for pastors. It's a tool for people. It's a tool for all of us to develop empathy and compassion and to see the world exist in more than just your own perspective alone, which goes naturally hand in hand with the work of pastoring. Pastors need a sense of empathy and compassion, but my goodness, it's not limited to pastoring. And, my wife works in the nonprofit sector, and she uses the Enneagram with her team as much as I do with my church. And, she can go on and on and on about how much it's transformed her role and her work in the nonprofit sector. And so I think that's true no matter who we are. I really do believe that. There's a member of our church who was on the show earlier, and she was commenting about how it has helped her. And she works in education. I mean, the Enneagram can be transformative no matter who we are. So yeah, young pastor, young anything, old anything. I believe in the power of doing the kind of work that opens you up to more fully to who God's people are around us. And I think that's one of the most beautiful parts of the Enneagram. Like, we're already made in the image of God. Whether you subscribe to the Enneagram or you think it's hocus pocus is irrelevant. Every person on earth already is made in the image of God. And so if we can see people more fully, if we can see the fullness of God's creation around us, then we are learning who God is. So, what a beautiful gift.
you so much, Trey. Fortunately, we're coming up to the hour. I can't believe it went by so fast. So if all the panelists could please provide us with their closing remarks, and then we'll say adios.
I would just say my closing remarks are, this is an invitation to tenderness with ourselves and tenderness with others and our communities. And I believe that's true to the heart of God.
Thank you, Kim. After you, Trey.
Like I said a minute ago, I think the Enneagram is a great tool. It's not the only tool. It's not a religion. It's not the panacea for everything to cure the world. If it works for you, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. But all I can speak to is my personal testimony that it has made me a better pastor, a better person, a better Christian, a better husband, a better brother, a better friend. And everything that I put the Enneagram up against, whether it's the Enneagram in preaching or the Enneagram and the death of my mother, it has provided a framework to understand and interpret what's happening around me. And when we have those tools and we grow that toolkit, I really believe we become more compassionate people as God intends us to be. So if you're willing to do the work, it's hard work, it's difficult work, but it's work that's worth it.
Amen. And as just a prayer of blessing, God is the God who sees. And even as I look at each of you into your eyes, and there are these beautiful affirmation messages that I think maybe some of you know, but maybe those who need to hear it for the Enneagram 7s, that message, and I think this is one from the Holy Spirit, your needs will be cared for. For us Enneagram 3s, we are loved for who we are. And for the Enneagram 6s, you are safe. You are safe. May we go in the blessing of the God who sees us.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing all your insight and wisdom. We'd like to thank everybody who attended on the webinar and the Q&A. Thanks to Jose and Terrell for facilitating. And if you would like to continue to see more events like this, please support New Church Ministry on social media and elsewhere. We don't hide.
No, you don't.
Thank you, Nadine, for all the awesome stuff that you do.
Great to get. Thank you all for hosting this and welcoming us into this space. This really was a rich time, a long, rich time.
Yeah, it's an honor to be part of this conversation. Thank you all.